So I'd love to just tell you a little bit about the work and where it came from, but then I'd really love to open up to questions and let you guys guide a little bit of some question and answers. I started this body of work in 2011. I was living in Marfa, Texas at the time. I was just about to move away. And in April of that year, the Rock House fire exploded on the edge of town and blew across 315,000 acres of West Texas and devastated ranches and cattle and wildlife and the natural environment that was in its way. And I'm sure you all have experienced the wildfires. I know that there was a fire here that same year. And it's a really profound experience to see the flames and the expanse of the fire on the horizon and to experience the smoke. And it's very affecting. And what affected me beyond just the physical and the visual experience was also the emotional component, that these fires are increasing and that they are devastating and that they're symbolic of a change that we're experiencing because of climate disruption. And as we continue to experience increasing aridification and desertification, the water comes from here and it's going over to where we have all the flooding concurrently. And so there's this displacement of the water cycle, and we're seeing that every year increase. And so for me, it was very intuitive. I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. I knew that I was responding to my environment and that there was something very profound that I needed to go explore in my work in this capacity. And so I went out into the landscape and I started collecting the charred material and documenting photographically. And I ended up with bags of blackened, charred wood and animal bones and cactuses and dirt, and put them in the moving truck as I went up to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and left Marfa. That summer, I was in Santa Fe. On the drive, there was the wallow fire that broke out in Arizona that was at the time the biggest wildfire there. I think that was over 500,000 acres that burned over 39 days. And then concurrently, a fire broke out in New Mexico, and that was the Los Conchas fire. And though that didn't have quite as much acreage, it threatened the Native American sites in the caldera, and it also threatened the National Laboratory nuclear waste. And so there's these fires that have been breaking out all over the Southwest. And so I've been trying to go to each of the largest fires and collecting material. And so I collected material from those 3 fires that year and found myself in the studio grinding material into a fine powder, into a pigment, and making the wildfire paintings. And to me, they're sort of the portraits and a eulogy to the nature that died, that burned. And the photographs sort of document the landscape and show various aspects of the aftermath. And the spiral mandala and also the pedestals over there that have the 3 objects on it. All of those materials come from a fire that's burning right now. It's from the Gila National Forest fire. It's called the Silver Wildfire in New Mexico. And it's currently the largest wildfire in our country. It's 138,000 acres, and it's not contained. It's still burning. And I collected that material last week. And so I've been trying to find ways to talk about some of these very painful experiences that we are all having to deal with as we see our landscape changing and our environment changing. And I think for me, the bonsai installation was a way to talk about how our sort of control over nature, how we have once trees towered over us, and now we can tower over a tree, and in a way we've become sort of the gods of nature. And how has that affected our relationship with nature, and how has that affected our ability to have a more sustainable lifestyle here on our planet? So that's a little bit of what I've been thinking about and doing, and I'd love to hear from all of you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If you want to have a conversation, I'd love to chat. My understanding is that the term global warming was designed by the oil industry in the 1970s, in the early 1970s, and it was a term that was chosen because it was friendly. We all go on vacations to warm climates. Maybe a warm climate wouldn't feel so terrifying. Climate change is also another term that I don't like. It's a misnomer. Climates change on a geologic scale, on a geologic time scale. So when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years, you have a geologic climate change. But we are talking about climate disruption, and actually it's even more specific than that. It's anthropogenic climate disruption, and so that's kind of how I like to refer to it, because it includes the human time scale that we've been experiencing these changes on, which has basically been since the Industrial Revolution. So that's why I tend not to, in fact I never use global warming, and I tend not to use climate change, but I try to be specific about my words when I talk about this, because I feel like the way we use language is so important, and we all know, we've all been susceptible to the advertising that we experience on a daily basis, and we create it, we use it, we live in it, and it's a powerful, language is a really powerful tool, and we have to be careful about how we communicate our ideas, because that also is a mirror to how we think about the concepts that we are trying to share with each other. And so for me, being very, very specific about what we're talking about, I think can help us talk about it more clearly. And ultimately, somebody once said, but it's so depressing. And I feel like, no, the truth will set us free. Like we have to speak the truth, and then we'll know what to do. For me, there's hope in the fact that the carbon is the end of the destruction cycle, but it's also the beginning of a new cycle. The carbon, if we have water, the carbon then will actually fertilize the soil, and new life will spring up very quickly. In fact, we were just in Marfa on the way here, and the land has repaired itself, and so there is that. There is this sense of, and for me, I look at, there's a lot of black in this exhibition, but carbon is an artifact of light, which I think is another place that I find hope in the work, and in the process of regeneration. When I started opening up the bags that I had all the objects in, particularly the cactus, there's still really a lot of moisture in them. So they give off a lot of the smell that you're talking about, and I think that's part of it. That smell actually is very hard to get out of things. If you've ever been by a building or something that is burned, it's very difficult to get that smell out. I think it's part of the lingering persistence of what a fire is. It's a very turbulent and aggressive energy. So yeah. One of my favorites is in the bowl, kind of in the far bowl in the back of the mandala. If you go by, there's a bunch of little pieces of tree bark, and it's highly iridescent. It almost looks silverized, and it's because the carbon, it burns so hot that the carbon actually turned to basically graphite. And there's just this beauty, I find, and we respond to something because it's pulling at us from the inside, and that's why we find it beautiful. Maybe because it even pulls us to the edge of what we're comfortable with, or to the edge of our own sense of life, and maybe it even has us looking into the void. I don't know, but there's something about beauty, I think, that can be haunting and that can be lingering, and so I'm hoping to find that balance of the destruction and the terrible with the beauty. And I think that some of these objects do that, where you just see this incredible, geometry in a cactus, or in the way the cactus cracked when the fire, passed it, or in the iridescence of the carbonized material. Even the rocks, I love the fact that the rocks, are a part of this. I have a photograph, actually, it's not in this exhibition, but of a rock that exploded because of the fire. And you can see on the ground all of the ash, and the rock had turned to ash, basically, and it had popped off, and there's layers missing from the rock. So one of the things that I started coming up against as I was removing material from these national parks is that that's actually illegal. And so in most cases, there's one case in Texas, because most of Texas is private land. So I was on private land at one point collecting material in Marfa, and I was actually asked to leave by a policeman. And then I've been asked by rangers in National Forest to leave, and in fact in one case I had a bag of pine needles, and I was asked to put the pine needles back. And this sort of got me thinking about how this interesting relationship that we have with nature and this idea of land ownership and land management. And I started wondering wondering how our history of land management and land ownership has impacted our ability to have a more sustainable and a more natural relationship with our environment. And so I think that it's been an interesting component in the work. The series that's called An Offering to Stolen Nature, my idea with that is that I steal it back from them because they think they own it. But yet it's burned, and is it the land management that's helped cause these wildfires? Well, there's some evidence that may be part of the issue. There certainly is something that we should consider and look at there. Usually a natural wildfire cycle is about 15 years, and that's not like a regular number. That's an irregular number. I don't think you can really say that there's a regular time frame for a real natural wildfire. And that's another reason I think that you want to call these are anthropogenic wildfires, even if they were started by a natural cause. The conditions are right because of the desertification that's caused by the anthropogenic climate disruption. So there's this funny cycle. But how much has our land ownership and management contributed to how we even think about nature in terms of our ability to own and control it? And I think it's worth considering. It's worth looking at. And so some of the works that include the objects are about that.